The inspiration that got us together again was simply because Everybody Loves a Happy Ending, which is the title of the album. And it's just one of those things that was always certainly hanging over my head. Every time I walked into a record company with any music, they were going, "Oh, it's great, yeah. Can you get back together with Kurt?" It's like, really? And it's just on and on and on. And it's like market forces and that kind of thing. We've always had business interests which have carried on after we split in 90. So we're always signing off on things together anyway. We have mutual friends. And it was just a matter of time, really, I think, before so much water under the bridge. And it was like, well, what are we worried about? Let's start chatting together, and see where it goes. I think that we were coming to an end of an era anyway. At the end of the 80s, early 90s, I think even if we'd stayed together, we would had quite a dip in our enthusiasm to pursue what we were pursuing. I think that we were both approaching 30, and certain things come along with that, such as wanting to become your own man and wanting to take on the record company. And I feel, we'd been together for such a long time. And I feel it's only natural that at some point, just for purposes of breeding, you want to go your separate ways.
And the thing is, there's so much, we had become hugely successful, and I think that with that comes a certain amount of pressure, and I'm talking personally here, but I'm under pressure, and I'm not very happy. I'm really not, and to leaving was driven by pure unhappiness. I wasn't enjoying it. It wasn't doing anything for me anymore, and I think it was confusion, and you need space and time, and you got to do that on your own. And me personally, I went through a marriage split up at that point in time. I'd met someone in America, my now wife, and we'd fallen in love, and I wanted to move to America, I wanted to move to New York, I wanted to get away from England, and basically, I wanted to start a new life, is what I wanted. Mm-hmm. And to do that, Tears for Fears at that point couldn't be part of that equation because it's not a new life. I think both for either of us, a lot of the reasons are similar, but we were in different circumstances. Well, for me, I wanted to. I actually didn't really want to perform that much. I mean, I think it was kind of pretty much kicked out of me. I mean, I did make a solo record which I hated for Polygram, and then I basically took time off. I was still involved with music. I mean, I hosted MTV shows for a while. I actually had a syndicated college radio show that I did for nearly a year. That was just live bands, and it was syndicated through 300 colleges in America. And then I guess that's sort of 3 or 4 years into it, and then I met this guy, Charlton Peters, in New York, who's a songwriter. I guess I got the bug again. We started writing songs, and then he persuaded me to start going and playing in New York. So I just started playing clubs in New York, and I had the best time ever because I would leave my apartment, walk to the club, play, and then walk home. And so it's basically for me rekindling my love of music, which was kind of the right reasons, which is you do it because you actually want to do it, as opposed to it just being a business, which is the side I didn't really like.
Well, I mean, I just carried on, really. I mean, that's the thing. It didn't really dawn on me just to stop and pursue other things. So I carried on making records, and I did 2 6-month world tours, and had a good time. I really enjoyed, I would say probably touring in the 90s was a lot of fun, because I was a bit older, a bit wiser, and I enjoyed a lot of the trappings of success which I'd denied myself in the 80s. And And then, I came to '96, and it was South America, and we were playing Colombia, and it was a tough trip because Tears for Fears had no success in Colombia since 1983. So they were kind of promoting the show with hits from the very first album. It was depressing, and so going on stage, I knew what my job was, just to make everyone go crazy. And after an hour and a half, they were going crazy, and I was singing Shout as an encore, and I thought, I've had enough of this. I've had enough of this, and it was. And there were sort of other things happening, management. I separated with management, and then I did the semi-retirement thing. 1996, I'd had 2 kids at home, 2 young boys, and I thought, I don't want to do this anymore. I want to go in a free fall, and instead of looking at a cash flow and thinking I have to do an album here, I have to do a tour here, of just going, well, let's see if I can live on what I've already made. So I did that, and then I started working on what I considered to be something completely different from the inspiration to Tears for Fears. So I was working very much with technology-based music without any meaning, any depth to the lyrics whatsoever. So that was quite new. That led me to produce a girl called Emiliana Torini from Iceland. So I did that album. And then I went back and listened to the solo stuff that I'd been doing, and I decided in the end I'd put it out. And it was called Tomcat Screaming Outside. I think when Kurt and I were first talking about getting together and making another record, and he heard the suggestion that it should be called, it was a joke for us, that the album should be called Everybody Loves a Happy Ending, because it's like, it's the Hollywood ending.
For me, I'm sure we may have different takes on it, but for me, it's like, I went completely one direction, Roland went completely another direction for the last couple of projects we did, And I'm really, I spend all my time only worrying about melodies and not production and like Roland was saying, the last thing he did was really more production based, and he didn't really care about lyrics or anything like that. And those are completely 2 opposite things. And the interesting thing is getting back together and working together again, to me, was, what, it does sound better when it's produced well. You got to pay attention to that, and for me, I still want the melody there. So it's an interesting. It definitely is from 2 different worlds, and when they come together, there's a certain thing that happens that makes it sound like us.
Yeah, I would say for me it was, I really had become quite reliant on technology and having all the latest samples and grooves and that kind of stuff. And I was, obviously I was living in England and Kurt was living in America. So I was, following all the trip-hop stuff and all that. And we had a huge local scene in the West Country with Portishead and Massive Attack. And melody was a dirty word. And initially when we came together, there was a little bit of vying, like, well, what the hell are we going to do? Are we going to just write songs, or are we going to do something that's ultra contemporary? And Kurt won, and we ended up in which is, I hadn't done this for absolute years, of sitting down with acoustic guitars and an upright piano with Charlton Petters and just waiting for things to emerge.
It can be tedious as hell at times and depressing, but then, a few weeks in, suddenly a song comes up that gets finished in a day and it's great.
Ladybird.
It's difficult because, to me, I think the first song we did together, to be honest, together, was Closest Thing to Heaven, because Ladybird was a chorus that I'd written with Charlton on something I was working on, but I could never get a verse to fit this chorus. And I played the chorus to Roland, and actually Chris Hughes, our old producer, who was in Bath at the time. And so we liked the chorus, we wanted to work on that. And Roland, came up suddenly started strumming the verse chords and the melody, and well, that's great. So the first song was kind of pieced together from something Roland did and something I did, and we stuck them both together. The first song we actually wrote was Closest Thing to Heaven, just sitting in a room. And that's one of those songs that came in a day. I mean, it was like, from the start of playing it to virtually finishing it, bar all the lyrics, it was done.
That was the song, that was the point at which we thought, hang on a minute.
We can do this.
We've got something must happen, because I hadn't done melodies like that for years, I think that when you decide you are going to do something quite standard and melodic, then you tend to look at all your favourite bands that did that kind of music. And so I would say a lot of the classic English pop bands, going through Blur, The Jam, Madness, back to the Beatles. I would say that Kurt was pretty much responsible for the direction of the album, because I can kind of come up with a lot of different stuff, but Kurt was very much editing a lot of what we were doing, and it was really his enthusiasm for a certain direction and for specific melodies, and in the end you just go, well, okay, I think I get it. So I don't, I haven't worked with anyone else who's, really that adamant and that fussy about making sure the songs are damn good.
For me, I get enthusiastic about melody and songs, and something that if I've heard something and the next day I still remember it. Sometimes you have to have someone there to, tell you when something's great or not great, but having said that, there are different perceptions. What I consider really great, Roland may not some of the time, and those do fall by the wayside. But obviously Roland's strength is in his songwriting. I mean, that's primarily it, and production. I mean, he's a lot fussier about production than I am. I mean, I'll let things slide that he won't let slide. As far as making a record sound really good.
Well, this is the album that should have followed Seeds of Love in many ways. That's because you can see definitely, as far as I'm concerned, quite a direct link between Seeds of Love and this album.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, I think there are definite threads that go through, Songs in the Big Chair to Seeds of Love to this record, and this is definitely, we took a year, 2 years between 1 and 2, 4 years between 3 and 4, and 13 years between, but. Yeah, I mean, there's definitely links, and the interesting thing to me is, when you play it, or when I've played it to people, and people that have been fans of ours or whatever, and some that it's been on and no one knows who it is, and people know who it is. I mean, there's a sound, it's sound, whatever it is, and there's no way of pinpointing it or trying to analyze it. It's just a sound that happens, but it sounds like a Tears for Fears record. I mean, Tears for Fears is the two of us.
Making the album was very enjoyable. I would say it was a fantastic journey. I think if we can continue in that vein with all the touring and all the promotion, then we will look back on this period as having been wonderful.